Hello everybody, this is TipTopMTG here today with another Magic the Gathering video. In today's video, we are going to be looking at Commander Legends and an overview of the limited environment. So for those of you who don't know, Commander Legends is the first product from Wizards of the Coast designed to be drafted to make Commander decks. And with that, first off, there are some rules questions, there are some questions of how the gameplay works, and also, as with every set, there are certain themes and archetypes that are just going to be stronger. And so we're going to cover those three basic things in this video. So we're going to start this off by talking about the rules of drafting. So I'm going to talk about like, oh, you draft 3-packs, you do this, you do that. We're going to follow that up by talking about the draft archetypes. So generally, each 2-color combination has an archetype, and that is signaled by what they call a signpost uncommon, which are essentially multicolor uncommons that show you kind of the theme that that color wants to do. So we can take a look at those, and then at the end, I'm going to tell you my experience with drafting Commander Legends. So why don't we jump right into this? So starting off, let's talk about drafts. So first off, they are 20 card packs. So unlike your usual draft, they are not, 15 cards. You have 20 cards, and each time you pick a card, you instead pick 2. And this is very similar to like Double Masters, for instance, where the first pack you get to pick 2. But this time, it's every single time you are past a set of cards, you pick 2 cards, and that's because, well, color identity is still a thing in this draft. So if you draft yourself a red and blue legendary creature, you cannot put a card that is green or even has a green mana symbol in the deck. So keep that in mind while drafting, that you do need to make sure that you are fitting within your commander's color identity. On top of that, each pack has 2 legends and a rare and a foil. So theoretically, you can get up to 4 rares or mythics per pack. So you could be technically, leaving behind 2 mythics in a pack if you are only picking 2. So keep that in mind. The legends can be rare and mythic, and you can get an additional rare. You are building 60 card decks, or 59 plus 1 if you are using a non-partner commander, or 58 plus 2, and by that I mean 59 cards in the main deck and 1 commander, or 58 cards in the main deck and 2 partners. And then this is not singleton, so you can, say you were to draft 2 Soul Rings, you can have 2 Soul Rings in your deck. And that's the general, overall idea. There are a couple other things. For instance, if you get done with your draft and you realize, oh wait, I don't have a commander, you just didn't draft a single commander, there's this card called the Prismatic Piper. It's a 5-cost 3/5 that can be any color in the command zone, and you can run 2 of them, so you can kind of run them as partners to fit your color identity. So if you manage to not draft a legend, which I really do not recommend, you really want to make sure you do draft your legendaries, you can do that. But generally, these are the basic rules. Now, why don't we break down the drafting archetypes, starting with Azorius. So Azorius is going to do something that it really often does, which is care about flyers. And actually what's interesting about Commander Legends is that each of the signpost uncommons are actually legendary creatures. So this, for instance, is Kanji, 5 cost, and he's going to boost attacking flyers and defending flyers. And yeah, this really tells you, hey, you're going to be playing flyers. Of course, the multicolor commanders do not have partner, so keep that in mind. But yeah, flyers, you're going to look for cards with flying and cards that care about it. Now, normally I would be saying right now, oh yeah, then look for cards in other colors that maybe have flying, but that's not their main purpose. But unfortunately, because of color identity, if you're running something like Kanji, you are going to be locked into just those 2 colors, which does definitely make drafting a little bit more restrictive. It means you can't really splash colors. Next, we have Dimir, which is going to care about Encore in the graveyard. So Encore kind of lets you take creatures from your graveyard, pay their Encore cost, and you exile them, and then you make a token copy for each of your opponents and attack them with those token copies, and then at your end step, you get rid of those tokens. So essentially, you're taking a creature from your graveyard, attacking each of your opponents with it, and then getting rid of that creature forever. Dimir here is going to care about that, and generally, creatures in your graveyard and creatures dying. That kind of sacrificing creatures to put them into your graveyard, maybe even self-milling yourself to then get the Encore ability outside of your graveyard. There are a couple cards in here that will sacrifice cards, and this is one where, unlike, flyers where, flyers, you just look for flyers, there are a couple more intricate cards that you can look for. For instance, there are cards that sacrifice creatures, which work really well with Encore, because with Encore, you sacrifice them at your end step, no matter what. So if you can find a card that, you know, has a cool encore effect. You get to do that, and then you find something that sacrifices creatures. You can kind of get free value from all of your encores. So keep an eye out for sacrifice outlets, which there are a decent amount of in the set. Next, we have Jury, Master of Revu, representing Rakdos. So Rakdos is going to care about sacrificing permanents, so look for cards that will sacrifice permanents or create lots of tokens, which kind of goes along with Black. Black is liking to make tokens in this set, so that works really well. So keep an eye out for token generators, ways to sacrifice things, and just things that care about death triggers. I mean, sacrifice for Rakdos and flying for Azorius is pretty generic. We see it in, I would say, most core sets, and just generally most sets follow that kind of theme, so there's not too much I really have to say here. Just generally look for the cards with the word sacrifice or things that give you things to sacrifice, like treasures, because treasures are a thing in this, along with pirates. So why don't we move on? Next, we have Gruel. So with Gruel, it's going to be power and toughness matters. So it's going to be, you know, this attacks, it's going to boost something equal to its power and toughness. It could be drawing cards equal to something's power. There are lots of different cards. So of course, if you're building in Gruel, you're going to naturally see a lot more of this type of card. So you're going to want to pick creatures with big power and toughness, cards that care about creatures with big power and toughness, and just generally, you know, cards. It's very generic Magic, where it's just like, I'm playing big creatures and killing you with them. And that is generally what Gruel is doing. And again, it is very similar to what Gruel does in other sets. I believe Zendikar had a similar theme. One of the standard sets this year had a very similar theme. Next, we have Hamza, representing Selesnya. I don't know why I can't think of the guild name. So this is going to care about +1/+1 counters, which generally isn't as common for Selesnya. Generally, they're caring more about tokens, but it's definitely not unheard of. We have seen it time and time again, and I actually think we've been seeing it a lot more recently, as it's kind of moved away from Simic more and into Azorius. Simic has become all about ramping and drawing and having the most overpowered spells. So yeah, generally, again, look for +1/+1 counters. One thing to watch out is don't have too many +1/+1 counter cards. If you don't have creatures, then, you know, you're going to run into issues where you have +1/+1 counters to put on things, but you don't have any things to put those counters on. So make sure you're careful with that. Generally, the purpose of this video is just to kind of inform you that when you're drafting, if you're like, ooh, I got a good Selesnya card, generally you're going to be going into +1/+1 counters. And, you know, in terms of like the power level, some of these are definitely more powerful than the others. I have only drafted Commander Legends 4 or 5 times, so I really can't tell you, hey, this one is the most powerful or this one is the weakest, because I have not been able to draft every color combination. I have drafted Golgari and a couple others, but generally this set has been really fun, and we'll talk more about my opinions on it here after we get through all these themes. Next, we have Felicie, who's representing Orzhov here, and Orzhov is really going to care about tokens. So this is something a little bit more unique for Orzhov. Generally, it's caring about creatures dying, maybe things exiling, stuff like that. But this is really going to care about when tokens enter the battlefield, when tokens die, when you create tokens, when tokens something tokens. Generally, cards that create tokens. And a lot of the time, like cards like Felicie, it will not care if they're creature tokens, so keep an eye out for things like treasure tokens that are in the set that may, you know, you may overlook, not thinking about the fact that a lot of these just say tokens, not creature tokens. Next, we have Izzet, and that is pirates. So yeah, they care about a creature type, and that is pirates. Pirates kind of have a theme of whenever they are attacking doing something and whenever they hit doing something. So keep that in mind, that you're going to be a more aggressive deck if you're an Izzet, which isn't always what Izzet likes to do. But, you know, you're going to want to be able to get through with damage, so cards that let things become unblockable. For instance, if you're early in your draft, you realize you're going to be an Izzet, and you see a card that lets something become unblockable, that may be a better choice, knowing that there are a lot of pirate cards that care about actually hitting your opponent. So keep that in mind. We have Golgari, and we have Abomination of Llanowar representing them, and that is elves, so they are going to just care about their elf creature type. There are lots of elf cards, there are lots of elf, like, you know, hating on non-elf creatures a little bit in this. So I think that, you know, when I played it, it was fun. it wasn't the most powerful deck. But that obviously just has to do with how I drafted, what cards I got. In terms of like the signpost uncommon, that was actually my commander, and it was decent, but it is a little bit of more generic magic a lot of the time, because you're just like, oh, I'm playing this creature. Why? Because it's an elf. Why? Because it boosts my commander. And so be wary of that, but it is definitely really good. There's a lot of removal in the 2 colors, so it is a more control-y elf kind of deck. Then in Boros, we have caring about auras and equipment. So it's not just auras or just equipment. It is caring about both. And like Tiana over here does that. And yeah, I've actually not seen anyone play this. Looking at the cards, it looks like that you could probably get something going here. And again, I don't think any of these themes are like, this one is so bad that you will never win with it. It really depends on your card pool. And, you shouldn't probably be looking at this and going, oh, I like enchantments and auras and equipment. I'm going to go Boros. You should generally kind of look at what the pack is kind of telling you and what your best cards are to draft. So keep that in mind. Now, next we have Simic, and this is caring about Cascade and CMC 6 or greater. This is kind of both of them because Cascade spells are generally more expensive, and then on top of that, you'll notice, so like Simic has the most Cascade cards. Why? Because they ramp, which means they can get up to the high cost, which means Cascade's more effective. But then they also have a lot of cards that care about when you cast spells with CMC 6 or greater. So just kind of both of those things combined. So you're going to look for big spells if you're going into Simic, which I mean is pretty general for Simic, I guess. So yes, those are all of the archetypes. So we've talked about the drafting and limited rules. One other thing I forgot to mention, Sealed still uses 6 packs. I don't really play Sealed that often just because I'd find it less, not skill-based, but just less interesting than draft. If you guys have any questions about the drafting rules of Commander Legends, I will do my best to reply to them if you leave them in the comments down below. But let me know when I talk about my opinions on the set. So first off, looking at it from a non-limited perspective, I know this is like a little bit of a thing. There's a lot of really cool cards. The issue is a lot of the time when you're drafting, you'll end up with like cards that seem really good, but are very restrictive based on their color identity. And that's kind of based on how the whole set was built. It's all based around partners and then multicolored creatures. And I kind of wish there was a mix of partner and non-partner monocolored creatures, but why don't we talk a little bit more specifically about limited? When playing limited, it is really fun. Honestly, I love drafting. Like any set, like even the most boring draft sets are still really fun to draft, whether it's, online or if it's with like people And so I think that, if you enjoy drafting, you're going to enjoy the set. There's nothing about it that is inherently wrong. The issue with this set comes from the fact that the games are super long. I played a 3-person game, which I mean maybe 4-person would have been faster, but I'm pretty sure 3-person would have been faster, and it lasted about 2 hours, not including the drafting. And that could have been that we weren't being very aggressive, but it also could have been the fact that we were all playing relatively common filled decks, because that's generally how Commander or how draft works. And so because of that, you end up with like these situations where I can't attack and this deck isn't built to like deal with that. It's not built perfectly, so there's no other way to win besides combat. And so now, you kind of have to sit there and eventually someone does win, but it is a little bit slow. So that would be my one big complaint with drafting, is that the games afterwards take too long. And there's a lot of just downtime of like, I draw a card. I don't have enough card draw in this deck because, you can't optimize it. So we're just all kind of sitting there top decking because, you don't draft enough card draw, or there isn't enough card draw in the packs. Then you run into these kind of issues. So I wish there was a little bit more card draw, and I almost wish the power level was a little bit higher. But the issue is there are those certain cards, the ones that are super insane, that do, kind of run away with the game. I mean, if you're running some of these colors that aren't super removal heavy, you can run into big issues of like, if someone's commander is Kodama, that's a pretty insane game, and it's something to be wary of. So it seems like most people's decks are pretty average, but if you can pull your one bomb, you're going to dominate. And that's not amazing gameplay in my opinion, but overall it was really fun to be able to play the Commander format, which in my opinion is one of the best, and be able to do it with drafting, combining two of the best things about Magic is really amazing. And I don't want anyone to take my slight little criticisms with it super hard. This video is not really meant to be a super like long video about the intricate, details of why drafting Commander Legends has its few slight problems. I'll probably expand on this a little bit more in my full review, which should be coming later this week. So yeah, if you guys enjoyed this video and found it useful, please hit that like button, subscribe to stay up to date with all things Magic, and see more awesome content like this, and I will see you in the next one.